Hello, everyone. Good morning. My name is Annabelle Villamarin, and I will be your presenter for today. I'll be talking about two key ideas in this presentation. Of course, the first one will be becoming 21st century educational leader. The second one is on blended learning models, cutting edge strategies for synchronous and asynchronous learning environments. Let's first look at the definition of a 21st century leader. Who are they? We know that 21st century leadership is how managers and leaders adopt a modern mindset so that they're equipped to deal with the unique challenges of the 21st century. This theory draws upon leadership behavior, skills, and qualities that can only be garnered and adopted through careful study and training. We all know that the 21st century has provided us with a lot of ambiguity, complexity, volatility, and uncertainty. And that's where I come in with this visual of the VUCA. This is from the Harvard Business Review in 2014, where they mentioned about the complexities of the 21st century. What does that mean? That there are a variety of key decision factors that we need to consider when we have to make a decision as a leader of the 21st century. The rate of change is rapid as well at this time. And that is where we talk about volatility. Ambiguity will be talking about lack of clarity about the meaning of an event. We have experienced the past 3 years VUCA in our schools, and we have seen uncertainty, unclear about what's going to happen next. There are a lot of ways that people adapted to complexity, volatility, ambiguity, and uncertainty in the 21st century. And that, according to research, has provided leadership and opportunities for leaders to showcase what is required for the 21st century. In the same breath, I would be presenting to you what Harvard Business Review calls as a solution to VUCA, right? So according to HBR, when there's complexity, it requires understanding, right? If there is volatility, it requires agility. And if there is ambiguity, it requires clarity, while uncertainty requires vision. I do apply this in my role as a leader at my school, where I identify projects and programs that I find would be too complex. And I spend time to really just understanding, the elements of that project and helping my members, my students and my teachers understand further. So we spend more time on understanding so that we can unravel the complexity of an event. Same goes for uncertainty. We know that the COVID-19 provided uncertainty to all of us, leaders of our schools. And this is where I come in with, a vision for where we want to go in the next month, in the next 3 months, and so on, where there is a clear path for the school community to address or to use. Again, it is a requirement as per Harvard Business Review to look at volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity so that we can become better leaders of the 21st century. It is also important to look at ourselves as a leader, and this is where the National Education Union came out with the ethical leadership framework. I have been fortunate to study a little bit about the ethical leadership as I plan this presentation, and I just want to highlight this research on what is ethical leadership. And here I have an example of learning, which is the first letter of leadership. And according to the visual, you can see here some examples of poor practices of a leader and examples of good practices. And how, as an organization, how are we as per these parameters? This is just, of course, on learning. There'll be more as per all the letters of the word leadership. You'll have L for learning, E for ethical, A for aspiration, and so on. And of course, I will add a link to the complete study of ethical leadership by the National Education Union, so you can also use it for self-assessment. Why did I highlight learning? Because I am impressed that this definition of ethical leadership started with learning. And I do believe that as a leader, we should start with openness to learning. According to Bevan in 2021, there's also something, oh, by the way, I think we should not, I will not be playing that video, but I will be sharing a link to that video where Bevan highlighted how to use the ethical leadership framework into our practice. Of course, we have a limitation of time, so we won't be able to go through that, but there is a walkthrough that we can use to be able to understand that, right? I'm going to move on now to the framework for ethical leadership in education. And here is a summary of, again, the capabilities of the 21st century leader. This is from the DFE, Department for Education in the UK. And what it tells us is that there are so many capabilities that we should develop as a teacher, as a leader. And here is a guide question for all of them. So if you look at the first one, which is selflessness, do we put aside the needs of our role? How can we respond adequately is one enduring question for selflessness. I like to develop more accountability in my action as a leader. And I am guided by the question, is there a clear route to be held accountable? Who is accountable to how, and how do you uphold accountability? This has become one of the focal points of my leadership in the past 6 months, because I wanted my teachers to understand the level of accountability of being a teacher. And of course, being a leader, I need to model all of these capabilities. Again, according to research, these capabilities help us to sort out, solve the VUCA that we face through the 21st century. Please have a look at all of them and have a self-reflection. Where do you think you are as per these? Another set of skills, I think this is a little bit more watered down or easier for us, is from Hammer in 2022. And according to him, these are the 3 skills that 21st century leaders should have. And first is that they should be relatable, and that leaders need to make a shift from production-based management to people-centric management. The second one is to be a creative leader, where leaders need to create new ways of working and introducing new processes and ideas so that our work will be much more streamlined, will be easier, right? And finally, we have to be instigators of change. You know, leaders need to be at the forefront of change, actively introducing and using new ideas and processes to motivate the teams. So these 3 are really easy to use set of skills is something Hammer promotes for us in the 21st century. I do have a few more, 5 most important skills. And this is also an extension of Hammer's work, and where he promotes the first skill as leaders should be connected. That there is something called connected leadership capability, where you can see from this visual, the leader is the one represented by the orange image, is leading from the front, right? And the manager is the one who's directing everybody to do the work. The second important skill, as per Hammer, is capacity building. So this is Jürgen Klopp. I think that's how you say it. And he's the best men's coach awardee. And you can see here that being a coach of a team, he is highly regarded by his team for capacity building, that he doesn't develop himself, he develops the team and members of the team to even be better than him. The third one is data analysis. And this is, again, one of the things that I like to do because I am more of a mathematical person. I like to look at data, I like to look at evidences, and I like to look at graphs and visuals that help inform decision making. And I think this is a very important 21st century leadership skill. The fourth one is you've got effective from a distance. And I like this because being effective from a distance means that we are really more focused on the teachers developing more than us developing ourselves. It's very much an extension of the previous one. When you're effective from a distance, that means that you, even though you're not there physically, you are a part of the decision making or a part of the project, or part of a program. I've seen a lot of leaders who are always there, who's always there physically, but I want to explore this concept of being an effective leader from a distance. And of course, the fifth one would be self-development. And that is how we as a leader continuously develop our skills so that we are able to face VUCA in our roles as leaders of our schools. I wanted to also highlight this work from the National College, and like how I'm very much a numerical mathematical person, and I like seeing visuals like this because it tells us, what are the things that really impact decision making at the school. And when I was going through this study of a 21st century leader, I didn't want to just identify this person. I wanted to be somebody that could be impactful, meaning that there are skills and strategies that I can take away from this study, right? And I noticed here that as per this visual, setting direction seems to be a common skill that we need to have as a leader. And you have here a visual that represents how impactful that is to the use of data, developing people, and use of observation, and how that is contributing to what we call the distributed leadership framework at our schools. It's also very much connected to staff leadership, and eventually it is very much connected to improvement in people attendance or improvement in people behavior, and definitely change in people academic outcomes. So I like to see this visual, and if I have an issue, say that my teachers doesn't seem to be very collaborative and they don't support a very teacher collaborative culture, then I know maybe I wasn't able to really develop people, or maybe I didn't really lead up to, setting direction, or maybe the organization is just not suitable for a teacher collaborative culture. What I like again about this visual is it allows me to look at all of the important elements that I need to look into. Do I trust my teachers? Do I have a certain level of expectation with regards to academic standards? And do I use adequate data to decide on decision making? And if you look at it, a 21st century leader does not just go in a linear pattern here. It is very informative. It's a very critical, I'd like to say, area to be, because there's a lot of elements that you need to be able to play with. And it could get too overwhelming sometimes, isn't it? Because we often are expected to make decisions that are not very easy. And being in the leadership, people would expect us to be the one to always make those decisions happen. So just have a quick moment to look at this visual in front of you so you can see how impactful different elements of our work are with our decision. Now, I mentioned about getting too overwhelmed, and that is normal. It's normal to get too overwhelmed, but I get inspiration from this book from Simon Sinek. He published the book Start With Why in 2009. And it seems very simplistic in my mind, but after going through the book, after watching him do his podcasts and his TED Talks, it just makes sense that we should always focus on why we're doing anything. And this is where I come in with what I call the context-driven approach. So as a 21st century leader, we need to know why we're doing anything. And once we understand the why, the how comes very easily, and the what comes very easily. So again, decision making at our school is context driven. The decision that I make at my current school, because we are K-12 school, may not be the same decision as somebody who is a supervisor of a larger community of schools, or somebody who's looking at early years, somebody who's looking at higher education. That's why we have to look at our context. That's why we have to start with our why. One of the things I also came across with is this visual again on decision making from the Harvard Graduate School of Education. And what I like about these tools, again, is that I can just take this, print this out, and say, okay, how do I make a decision on anything as a leader? How do I facilitate discussion? How do I promote collaboration? How do I lead from the front? How do I coach and mentor, right? This visual is very easy to follow again, which is just a yes or no sort of a response to the question. So we start with, of course, thinking about making a change. I'll give you a very good example. At our school, we have decided to look at service. How can we make it explicit? Providing children, teachers, and parents a framework for service learning. And so since we wanted that to be our project for this entire year, we had to make a decision on how to use our resources and our teachers and our time. So what I like about this visual is you first start with, is the quality of the decision important? Of course, it's very important. It's very impactful. So you pick the why, which is the yes. And the N, of course, is the no, right? So you say yes to that, right? And then you go on to number 2. Is team commitment to the decision important? Of course, because they are at the forefront of service learning. So I click again, or I pick why, which is yes, and so on. And eventually, you will see from here what type of leadership will have to be used. So if it's something that is impactful to the team, it is something that we require adequate information, it is something that is well structured and so on, you can be guided by the 7 questions. You will be able to lead up to either an autonomous, where decision is to be made by the leader alone, delegated, which means that decision will be shared, C, individual or the group, or you can do C2, which is consultation, or you can do a G2, which is joint, right? So again, a very nice tool for us. The 5th important skill highlighted a while back was on professional learning, and I just want to add a little bit of that here, and that is this visual again on the typical modes of professional development. Of course, there's so many ways to learn. We don't have to expect the school to be the one to provide the learning for us, but there are many opportunities for us to continue to grow as a leader. Here are just some of the tools that I've used personally. Of course, Coursera is free. FutureLearn is free. I work with the IB, so we have a playlist of professional development. DFE has a lot of online resources. Google training is also free. Microsoft training is also free. You just pay if you want to get the certificate. Apple training is the same. Edutopia teaching channel, of course. Right now, we are here at PWU for our professional development. Now, we can do that as a person, but that is mostly motivated by the individual. And I don't want to be just motivated by the individual. I wanted to be motivated as a system, as a systemic event. And so what I have done is I have incorporated professional development in our appraisal. Because leadership is not just developing yourself, you also want to develop people under your care. And that is when we have developed the professional development form. At the beginning of the year, we share the PD form with the teachers, and then the teachers will fill it in. There are about 8 parameters in the PD form. We walk them through the process. Of course, if you're interested, I can share with you a copy of our PD form. It has self-appraisal, and it has key performance indicators. We also want to make sure that the teachers know what is required of them. And the first one is program mastery. We want to make sure that the teachers are aware of the program and they have a mastery of what they're expected to deliver. Assessment design is purposeful. We also highlight student development, supporting co-curricular activities, highlighting parent collaborations, because that's a goal that we want at our school. We also want to make sure that the teacher continue to develop professionally, and that's where we have our teacher development and professional alignment. Professional alignment is that as a school, we have our own school culture. So we want to make sure that the teachers are aligned with the school culture. And optional, there are just teachers who want to be outstanding. And that is where we have service and beyond the boundaries, optional indicators for the performance. I came across this leader as architect. And according to the definition, an architect is a person who designs and implements targeted interventions to close the school's gap by carefully and strategically aligning all of the organization's building blocks. And I like that being an architect, you align, all those factors I mentioned a while back. You've got the vision, you've got the systems, you've got structures, capabilities, you've got the culture. But you are the designer of that. You are really focused on creating systems and creating targeted interventions for the organization. There are many protocols to be used to make that happen. I'm fortunate to be able to work with my team and develop our own. We call it the RAS. So RRAS protocol, which is the RAS protocol. R stands for rational, starting with Y. The second R stands for research. We have to be backed by research. Assessment. We want to see the evidence of success. And S, of course, would be our strategy. So RRAS strategy is something that we develop at our school. All right, so that's the end of the first bit, which is about 21st century leadership. And I hope you were able to look at some elements over there. The second part is on blended learning models. So I'm going to go quickly on this one. We have experience, an overnight upskilling of blended learning models. We looked at synchronous and asynchronous models. We looked at hybrid models, and there's so many other names for it. But really, according to Tucker, asynchronous learning are opportunities for children to look at many elements of their learning through different opportunities. And here's just a visual to tell us more about asynchronous learning. And asynchronous learning occurs at different times and in different places. Student can access the content, the resources, activities at any time and from anywhere. And students can control the time, place, and the pace of their learning, right? And students work independently to complete assignments and tasks during asynchronous learning. In asynchronous learning environment, this occurs at the same time and in the same place where the students are working with the teacher or meeting online for a video conference, for example. Students can access the content, the resources, the activities at a specific time and location. And there is some level of control from the students when you're looking at synchronous learning activities. And of course, they have access to their teachers, to their peers for support while they are completing their assignments and tasks. Okay, according to Dr. Kathleen Tucker, the biggest advantage of synchronous learning is, of course, human connection. We've experienced this. When the kids came back after the online learning, even though we're doing synchronous learning online, it is just different when you have that human connection. And they have access to the support from their teacher and each other. So according to her research, she really focuses on prioritizing community building. And I think we have all become experts in blended learning models, and there's a lot of tools and strategies available out there. But what I'm coming in with in this presentation is really relationship building, and that human connection and the community building. I have here a visual from Kathleen, and she mentioned that these are really good opportunities for community building, where you have one group in a class or two groups in a class and two groups online, a hybrid model. And according to her, the differentiated instruction, interactive modeling, and guided practice, and all of these elements happen really through all of this. She has provided an example of how it's done per day. So here is a day one example where there are stations and teachers prepare 4 different stations and the children go around all of these different opportunities. And then day 2, they will change again, day 3, and of course, day 4. So there's a lot of permutations that she has described over here. It's just an example. I've given you an example that can be used, but I don't think we are promoting this as much as we did 2 years ago when we do online learning. Okay, so Tucker highlighted these 6 important elements where, again, with all of these requirements that we need to cover, how much do we actually work as a group of people in building relations, right? She also mentioned about building a playlist. Here you can see that they're very similar to the professional development that I received from the International Baccalaureate as a teacher of the IB. There are different ways to learn and there are different ways to address those needs. However, I really want to highlight here again that we are responsible of the standards and skills that we need to set as a school community. There are some boards or some frameworks who decided to cut down on the curriculum expectations. I am not in favor of that because we shouldn't be cutting down. We should be looking at revised ways and uncovering instead of just covering. The playlist should have clear learning objectives. It builds on formative assessment or formation of knowledge or formation of learning. It should not be just one modality. There should be mixed modalities, different ways. There should be choice for children. And teacher checks where there is an opportunity for the children to seek advice and support from their parents, from their teachers, and from their peers. And finally, there should be an evidence of the learning, that there should be some kind of a portfolio where a progress can be identified. This is where I want to come in with the PERMA model of well-being. I like that we use this at our school, where in addition to all of the things that we need to do in our playlist, we also have to look at the well-being of our school community. It has become a forefront of the pandemic, and I want to highlight it here because in as much as we just transferred or did what we usually do in the classroom online, we highlighted well-being much more right now during the 21st century, meaning right after the pandemic or during the pandemic, right? What I'm trying to say is we do the same thing face-to-face, and we sort of just created an avenue for that to happen without seeing each other face-to-face. But what that experience allowed us to do is really reflect deeper into our well-being as a community. So this is one tool that we can use, or we have been using. I love this tool. Again, this is as a result of what has transcribed. We've learned to regulate our emotions much better. We are able to create frameworks to support our children to regulate their emotions. And I like that even as early as 2-year-old kids in the early years classroom, they were able to explore the zones of regulation. And you can use this from Kuiper in her research in 2011. I want to end this with, again, the book from Simon Sinek. Everything that we do as a leader of the 21st century should always be based on the why, the context of our organization. And I think we will be able to tackle many of the VUCA, the uncertainties, complexities of our jobs through planning and careful consideration of our context. I hope that you've learned a few bits from me regarding 21st century leadership and blended learning. And take care, everyone. Thank you for listening.